My name is Evan Litwin. I use he, him pronouns. I am a member of the steering committee for our New North End, or Ward 4 and 7 NPA. And I'm joined also with my members who are here, my fellow members. Jeff is at the Miller Center holding things down. Thank you, Jeff. And Olivia Taylor also. Thank you for being here. She's going to help facilitate some of our conversation later today. And just a really quick kind of rundown is that we normally at our usual meetings we'll run around and go around and invite folks to introduce themselves. Just for time's sake tonight, we're gonna actually forego that so that we can jump right into all the amazing speakers and make sure there's enough time for community conversation. And additionally, we just ask that you either share the street that you live on, or if you're not comfortable sharing the street, you can also share the neighborhood that you live in, just so that we know where folks are joining us from. And that can help later on as well if we have a lot of folks join us. So we don't know, and I see there's already quite a few people popping in right now. So we do have one announcement before I open it up to announcements for everyone, which is that Ward 4 is accepting interest for the community block. I'm going to get this wrong. The community block grant committee, something to that effect, to help basically help us decide how to spend our community block grant dollars. So if you're interested in that, please get in touch with either our city councilors or members of the NPA. And we've also posted it on Front Porch Forum recently with lots of information. It's on the CETA website. And we also have it in the Facebook group for the New North End. As per usual, we just ask that you be respectful when other folks are talking, that you be mindful if your microphone is on or off. And that's about it. Just remember, we're all neighbors here, and we're all here because we care about our community, and we all have a shared interest in making sure that it is safe. And that is my dog Squeaky Toy. So I will turn it right over to the next person on the agenda, which is usually our elected officials. So whoever would like to go first, please do. Or wait, actually, if there are any other announcements that folks wanted to add that were important.
That community block grant was for Ward 4 only. We do have a representative for Ward 7, just to make sure everyone knows that.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
Evan, I just would invite everybody. I'm Cindy White with Burlington Park Rec and Waterfront, but also a Ward 7 resident. I welcome everybody. 3:15 tomorrow, we'll be doing the opening up of the bike path out in the south end. The north end got the full treatment earlier, but the south end will be opening up tomorrow at 3:15. We welcome everybody from the north end to come down to the south end and join the festivities. That'll be 3:15 at the Austin Drive entrance in Oakledge.
Awesome, thank you. Martine, I saw your hand up. Did you feel free to jump in?
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to ask Sarah if she would like to go before me. And I also wanted to just give a shout out to the folks who made our new branch of the Fletcher Free Library available, which opened today. Very exciting. If you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend a visit.
Yeah, and thank you for everyone who moved boxes. Cool. Well, then we'll move right into it. And Sarah, I hear you got nominated to lead us off, kick us off this evening.
Okay. Thank you. Sarah Carpenter, Ward 4 City Councilor. And I was always glad to be here. We're going to try to be really quick tonight. There's, as always, a lot of stuff going on in the City Council level. Among other things, we're gonna start budgeting for next year. So hard to believe that, but we're already beginning that process. So obviously, let us know what you're thinking. Two issues I wanted to mention tonight, because they're really, I think, public safety related, and we won't have time to spend a lot of time on them on this agenda. But one is that this last budget year, we set aside funding for something called the CAHOOTS program. And it's really a crisis intervention, and it was started out in Eugene, Oregon, where their police department has a group of folks that do crisis intervention. They're staffed with a medical person, a medic, a nurse, and a crisis intervention person. And it's a really fabulous model, and it's been done in a lot of communities. And we were a little slow in the get-go to get started, but the RFP is out now. The city has some money in it, and we're working closely with the medical center, hospital, and Howard, and the street work program, and police department, and trying to put that together. And we hope, and this will be critical, we're going to need some funding from the state to really make it work. So it's a work in progress. There are a few of our neighbors who have been strong advocates for this program, and they've been really integral. So I just wanted to let you know that it's in the works, and I think it's going to be a key program to add to our public safety programs as we look at transforming things. The other really hot button issue this last month and several months, it has been our homeless crisis. This is really not new news, unfortunately. Quite sadly, it's not new news. And we're struggling with what are the right options that the city can offer. I'm expecting the mayor to make some announcements tomorrow, on some programs that we are going to try to support. Using some of our ARPA money is the highest priority, or the flexible ARPA money. We have different pots for different things, is to try to beef up some of our services for the houseless. It's a regional problem. It's not just a Burlington problem, but we need better options than what we've got. And there isn't an easy answer. I mean, obviously not having enough housing is the answer, but what do we do tomorrow when somebody has nowhere at all to go? And so we want to work with the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance and others to really tighten that up and beef that up to see if we can get some quicker, faster answers, and maybe some more innovative answers. So that's, for me, a really high priority. I sit on the CD&R committee, and we're meeting tomorrow to flesh out some of those. And unfortunately have some updates because there's several programs that the state has stepped back on, and we're concerned about that. In particular, some of the funding for the Turning Point Center, which does opioid interventions, and a change in policy in providing transitional housing for people released from the correctional system. So we've got a lot on our place to figure out how we can tackle that. Since we haven't got a lot of time, I'll let my colleagues offer other things, but I'm always open for questions.
Mark, did you want to?
Sure. I saw how jam-packed the agenda is tonight, and I was gonna just say that I would forfeit my time to make sure that we get to all the speakers, but I'm also happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Well, we have time. If there's anything you want to add after, feel free. And thanks for being here. And Martine, that makes you next.
Thank you, Evan. Can you all hear me? Wonderful. So I'm here tonight on behalf of the 3 New North End school commissioners, myself, Kendra Sowers, and Monica Ivanchich. I'm speaking for the 3 of us. Obviously, the safety of our students and our school district employees is of the utmost importance to the school board and the superintendent. As you can imagine, one of the greatest challenges over this past year has been keeping our students and staff safe during this pandemic. It's been a long couple of years. Our nurses and maintenance staff have done an amazing job following best practices in state and federal guidelines. But we want to urge the public to get vaccinated, get boosted, wear masks indoors, and practice social distancing to keep all of our students safe, to keep our staff safe, our teachers as well. There are students who are having to miss school because of COVID infections. So just a reminder on that, hugely important. I always like to take a minute and just remind folks to please drive carefully around our schools. We all know that there are folks who drive extremely fast in our city, as well as recklessly, and especially in the morning and the afternoon when school lets out. It's critical that folks are paying attention. Lastly, we want to acknowledge the safety of our high school students and our high school staff. The BHS downtown location has been a great interim, well, maybe not great, it's been a good interim solution for us. But the new North End school commissioners look forward to the day when we can welcome both our BHS and BTC students back to one campus on Institute Road. We'd like to remind the community that although we've vacated the building most recently due to the contaminants, the presence of PCBs in the air and the materials, the buildings, and I say buildings because as you all know, there are 5 of them that make up the campus, were not and are not safe. The Institute Road campus is not ADA compliant. It makes traveling from class to class extremely difficult for those with mobility issues. As many of you know, the roof is falling apart, and on any given day, there was water strewn in many of the parts of the school. The antiquated HVAC system caused fluctuations in heating and cooling that were frankly unsafe for some of our students as well. And windows and casements were literally falling out of the walls of the building. At last count, I believe there were 24 ways to get in the building. Again, an extremely unsafe scenario. And because of these critical safety factors, we want to fully acknowledge and support the plan to build a new high school at Institute Road. We will be talking about this obviously more in the future, but last night we did hire an architect firm to start work on this. And we just, look to our community for support. And obviously we'll welcome creative ways to look at funding, because this will be a heavy lift for our community. And that's all I have. I really appreciate the time. And please reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you, Martine. And thank you for everything that the school board has been doing. You guys have had an amazing run for sure. And so I'll welcome Shireen Hart, and she's going to share a PowerPoint.
Great. Thanks, Evan, and I'm hoping you can see it now.
Yes.
Okay, great. And I'm just going to invite you to interrupt me what time do you want me to stop talking?
You've got about 7 minutes, and if you need a minute or two over, I think we can.
Okay, just interrupt me if I go over. But so I just want to start by saying thank you for having me. I live in the new North End. I'm serving my second term on the police commission. I'm just speaking individually. I'm not speaking on behalf of the whole commission, just my personal views. We don't represent all of the wards. You'll see that Kevin Garrison and I are in Ward 7. That's not, they don't look necessarily to get folks from different wards, and Kevin and I are neighbors. 4 people have their terms up in June. So I don't know if folks are planning to seek to be reappointed or not. So typically we meet the 4th Tuesday of each month at 6 p.m. We recently moved from the Burlington Police Department's community room to Contoy's Auditorium, generally speaking. And I just gave a link to where you could find the agenda and the minutes on board docs. So I would say over the last couple of years, we've been working on changing and improving the commission. And we recently engaged NACOL, which is the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. We did 8 hours of training with them on how to effectively fulfill our role as an oversight body. Their mission is to create a community of support for independent civilian oversight entities that seek to make local law enforcement agencies more transparent, accountable, and responsive to the community. And our engagement of NACOLT also includes 10 hours of consultation. And we most recently used that for an hour session to talk about what is the best way to proceed in reviewing directives, the police department's directives. So that was really helpful. So what we do, if I can summarize it or sum it up in the easiest way, is we review complaints that either come in externally or internally to the department, and we offer recommendations to the chief on his proposed response to the complaint. And we review and revise policies and department directives with the department about how policing is conducted. So what have we learned? I would say we've learned that it's really important that the police commission looks independent and that appearances do matter. So for example, we've been meeting at the police department. We've changed that because folks just assume that we are part of the police department. And I think it leaves room for folks to speculate. Like at one point, they thought our chair was a member of the police department. So I think one of the biggest things we've learned is it's necessary to show our independence so that we can earn the community's trust. And we're also working on we've gotten approved to have a staff member who's not from within the police department to help us with some of the work we need to do. And so on the public trust, we're working on building that, as I said, and we're trying to be more transparent and share what we do and bring the public into that. So when we do directives, one of the things we learned from that recent training is that the public really needs to be able to be involved in our policy work. So the commission with the department and the public. So at a certain point in the process of working on directives or policies of the department, we'll bring the public in. And then we very quickly, there is a joint committee you may have heard about that produced that big report, the CNA report. And that was because after the George Floyd killing, we wanted to have an assessment of the department. It resulted in 151 recommendations, and I have a link to that. The department, we had a meeting last night. We know that they are actively working. The chief is actively working on that. And the Public Safety Committee of the City Council is also going to be working on that by putting together 2 police commissioners, a representative of the police department, and possibly some others. And they're starting in January to actively work on going over all of those recommendations and how they're going to be implemented. So very quickly, a typical police commission meeting starts with police commission business. Then we have public forum. We have the chief's report. Last night, he did an excellent presentation. It was a slide deck with crime statistics and race data. I recommend you go to the board docs for that and access his report. And his monthly reports differ based on what's going on in the city. And then we as a fairly new commission over the last year have always tried, well, I say always, in the last year, every meeting we try to have an educational component, so a half an hour. And last night we were really lucky to have one of the new community support liaisons. And I know that Lacey Ann is going to be talking about that later on in the meeting, but we had one of the individuals who recently was hired for that role. And he spoke about when he used to be at the Howard Center doing street outreach, what kind of de-escalation training he got and what kind of training he's gotten with the Burlington Police Department. So last night's focus on education was de-escalation, and we offered that for ourselves and for the community. And then we have policy discussion. So what are we going to do about various department policies? And so we formed a subcommittee that's starting in January, and we're going to first work on the policies about interacting with persons with disabilities, persons with diminished capacities, and interacting with limited English proficiency. And we'll be working with someone from the department, should be on that committee with us, and as well as folks with subject matter expertise. And then we get a presentation in writing that you can access, use of force, which is in the previous month, all use of force that occurred. And we get a summary. It doesn't have names of the individuals involved, but it will provide race data on them. And it gives a summary of the use of force. and we can request any of the related videos, and soon those videos will be released to the public as soon as the department's able to hire someone to redact the videos for privacy. And then we also get to hear about commendations every month, which is, letters of praise of the department from members of the public or even from within the department. And that's always nice to hear. And I will wrap up, and then we go into executive session, which is where we talk about individual complaints. And we can talk about details and names in that. And so we'll talk about, the chief will tell us what he's recommending, and we have the opportunity to discuss that. So the chief could either say, I don't want to spend too much time because I'm wrapping up, but he might find that there's just simply nothing to the complaint. Like, we got a complaint last night that there was a police officer in South Burlington not wearing a mask in a store. Well, we don't even know if it was a Burlington officer, so there's nothing to do with that one. Or the chief might say it's unfounded, it didn't happen. He might say it's sustained, and then we will recommend, if we disagree and we can't come to an agreement with the chief, then it will go to the mayor. And so this is my last slide, and how I view our approach is that we are 7 individuals with different views and different voices. I actually don't even know the political parties of any of the folks I'm sitting with. Truly, I don't know that about them. But we try to find consensus when we're at odds as a group, and I have found that's worked really well for us. I feel like we're a high functioning group in terms of getting to consensus. And I would say there's a great deal of respect for the department and the individuals, and we balance that with an interest in making improvements where we think they can be made. And we're committed to gaining the public's trust. So I know that was a lot. I'm happy to share this with anyone if I spoke way too quickly, but I thank you for having me here tonight. And I will get out of that document as soon as I can figure out how.
Sure. Thank you so much. I know you can't stay with us this evening for until the Q&A period. So is there a way, if somebody had a question about something that you shared tonight, is there a way that folks could contact you?
Yes. Yes, I can give my email now to folks because it's super simple. It's Shireen, SHIRIN @Shireen.com. So Shireen@Shireen.com, both times spelled SHI. It's an old one. It's from the early 90s. And I am happy to have you email me if you want that slide deck. I literally just threw it together tonight because I thought it might be easier to talk about things. So thanks so much for having me tonight.
Thank you. And thanks for being on that commission. It looks like it does a lot of good work. Okay. So we have our staff from Parks and Rec. We have Cindy and possibly an exciting new guest.
Yeah, so I'm Cindy White, the director for Burlington Parks, Rec, and Waterfront. We are very excited about our new Urban Park Ranger program, but I'm going to hand the baton over to Aaron Moreau. Aaron is our waterfront superintendent and our harbor master. And that program of the department will be overseeing the Urban Ranger program. And Aaron just did a great job last night talking about the program with our Parks Commission. So Aaron, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Cindy. Hi, everyone. Aaron Moreau, also New North End resident, Ward 7, Revere Court. So hello, neighbors. Yeah, so I guess I'm finding my land legs. I'm usually more or less on the water side of things, but the Urban Park Rangers is a new program within our department. Really excited about it. Bottom line, what I see that this is going to do is to get more people into our parks. We know a positive presence yields better results for actions in our parks. We want everyone, our community, our visitors, tourists, kids to enjoy their time in the park system here. And we want to try to tamp down some of those unwanted behaviors. So we're really looking towards the Urban Park Ranger program to help us with this. It would be ultimately right now 2 full-time members, a lead ranger and a ranger, and then we'll also employ some seasonal staff within this program. And the intention is to get outside and be in our parks, have folks be aware. Obviously, the staff would be aware of our ordinances. So some of those, I don't even want to say pesky because I think they're quality of life issues, such as fireworks, off-leash dogs, fires on our beaches, right? So the smoke that we all can smell in the summertime. We'd really like to do Burlington Fire a favor and reduce those and help out our neighbors. So we're going to program these folks to be later into the evening when we know that more of a presence would be wanted and needed. And we know that if there's a positive presence in the parks, typically unwanted behavior doesn't start. So that is our intention with it. This is new. So, open eyes, open ears, very welcome to feedback. But we're really, really excited because the first position just posted this week. So a lot of work has gone into that process to get to this point. The person who will oversee the Rangers is Alec Kading. He was previously our campground manager and has expanded his role. So one, he's really used to busy areas that are high engagement with our customers and not afraid of inserting himself into, some tough conversations. Think North Beach, summer, college has just let out, and you're the one person to have all those conversations. So he's not shy about it, but he has just a really amazing, calm demeanor. And I know that's going to be spread throughout our Rangers. So, future kind of what we're looking at is, first and foremost, we want these Rangers to have really great communication skills. Our kind of thinking, being out there and really just engaging with people. It's welcoming to the park, whether they have a question, whether they want to know where the restrooms are, or perhaps the history of our park. So we've kind of left the background piece open, meaning, what we're looking for in the candidates is pretty wide. I think that it could be anyone from a naturalist to someone who's been in a park system in Vermont or another state, or someone who's a really big history buff that can connect some of our histories through our parks program. So pretty wide ranging, because we're really just looking for a really great communicator to, as a liaison from our department to the community. I see a future here of programming. So I think it'd be really cool to have a park ranger meet in our schools and set up some programming where we can get field trips into our various parks. We are really lucky that we have so many neighborhood parks close to our schools, so that shouldn't be difficult to do that, get kids outside and get them connected with this program. We're also open to see what other opportunities, we've heard about guided programs through the cemeteries as a possibility. And we're really just open to some of these opportunities that we see. We're just really excited to get a greater positive presence into our parks. I'll stick around as best as I can here for the question. We're falling at kids' bedtime, but I think I can squeak it out again. And thank you for your time. I appreciate that as a neighbor.
Great. And then we have our team from BPD next on the agenda.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lacey. Benny, I know you're out there somewhere.
I am.
Do you want to go first or shall I?
You can go ahead, Lacey.
All right. So I'm Lacey Smith. I'm the Community Support Supervisor, formerly the Community Affairs Liaison for the City of Burlington at the Burlington Police Department. So I've been in this position for 7 years now, and in layman terms, I am the city's social worker. I was the only one for the last 7 years, but now I have a team of 3 that join me. One of them who spoke at the commission yesterday was formerly a Howard Center street outreach worker. We have another young lady whose background is from the refugee resettlement program and the Reach Up program. And then we have a third person who came from the parallel justice program over at the CJC. So they have been up and running since October. And luckily, they had the ability to just basically hit the ground running. They know the community. They know what the job really entails. So as social workers, we basically, the premise of the job is really based on this idea of we are both doing reactive work and proactive work. The reactive side of our jobs consist of like in the moment needs. So a call comes into dispatch, we get sent out either with an officer, in lieu of an officer. We could go out with street outreach. We could go out with oh gosh, I was going to say there's one other. Oh, the community service officers, as Vinny will talk about. So we kind of can go out in a combination of or independently to calls for service that come in the moment. But then we're also, we also do kind of the proactive work. And that is really the meat of what we do. It's the follow-up, it's building the relationships. It is what allows us to really try to help change the behaviors that steer people out of this system that they are currently kind of spiraling in. So we're intentional about who we're making connections with, and we use data around that. And yeah, so there's a multitude of ways to get in touch with us. You can either call the department. I am on the phone tree. If you called the non-emergency line, we have a group email. We will at some point soon be up on the website. So yeah, I look forward to taking questions. You want to give your spiel?
I can. So I'm Sergeant Vinny Ross, whatever you want to call me. I've been at the PD since 2015, and I've been a sergeant since this past July. And recently I was assigned as the community service officer supervisor, as that program is going to start getting a little bit bigger. So the community service officers are another police support position. You've probably seen them driving around in their big white truck. They go to animal complaints, VIN verifications, a lot of our priority 3 calls that are non-criminal. They'll start to go to. Something new that we have already started rolling out for them is going to non-investigated crashes. So crashes where a pedestrian's not hurt, where nobody in the car is hurt, and where the damage is minor. Our newest CSOs are going to those, and our CSOs that we've had for a while have started to go to them as well with the change in job description. They're also going to be enforcing some city ordinances, like the drinking ordinances, some of the quality of life issues downtown on Church Street with some of the unpermitted musicians and some of the stuff down there that we've been getting a lot of complaints about recently. And then noise complaints. So they've started going to noise complaints. In the past, our CSO program has only worked from 10 in the morning till 8 at night. But now they're working, we have 2 shifts. So there's a 7:30 to 5:30. And then we have the newest 2, based on seniority, are working from 4 p.m. until 2 a.m. We've been authorized by the city council to have up to 12. I think we have hired 1 more. I'm not totally sure on that. But the plan is by the end of fiscal year 22, we can have up to 12, I believe. So, looking forward to answering some questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And next is Rachel Jolly from the Community Justice Center.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Jolly. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the director at the Community Justice Center in Burlington, which is part of CEDO, Community and Economic Development Office. I thought it would make sense to describe the kind of nest we sit in and then describe a little bit more about what we do. We are about 23 years old. We're the oldest community justice center in the state of Vermont. Many don't know, but there are 17 community justice centers, 4 of which are in Chittenden County, and Burlington is one. We're also one of 12 court diversion agencies. And so the difference there is that the Department of Corrections funds, at least in part, those community justice centers. And then the Attorney General's office funds 5 programs that make up court diversion and pretrial service programs. And I'll describe what these are, but I'm just kind of describing the scope of the network in which we sit. And so we are both a court diversion agency as well as a community justice center. We're a combined agency. and we're one of 7 combined agencies in the state. And so we do serve all of Chittenden County with those court diversion and pretrial service programs, and then Burlington for our DOC funded programs. So again, part of a network, but now getting back to who we are and what we do. So we've always been part of CEDO. We've been in 5 different locations, actually. Currently, we're at 200 Church Street, about a mile or about a block away from City Hall. So where the rest of CEDO, the CEDO department is. Our mission is around addressing the roots of crime and conflict so that everyone experiences dignity, safety, and justice in the communities we serve. So we do also, kind of like you were hearing from the CSOs, or from Lacey, we do proactive work as well as reactive work. So we use restorative principles and restorative justice. And for those who aren't familiar with that term, it's a relationship-based approach to, one, building community and a sense of voice and belonging. And then so that relationships are stronger and that they make a foundation so that when there is conflict or even crime, and generally you can count on that there will be a when rather than an if, when there is conflict, if there are relationships there, then people care enough about those relationships to want to repair them. So that's restorative practices is kind of the big umbrella that uses various principles of engagement, responsibility, or you can alternate that with accountability, and equity. So it's where everybody has a voice, and we definitely rely on kind of collaboration and engagement in that way. So we use restorative principles for most of our programs, and restorative justice is the modern movement of taking restorative principles and putting them into the Western criminal justice system. So restorative justice in its most traditional sense has been practiced for thousands of years. Anywhere there's indigenous communities across the globe, they've used some form of this more holistic form of traditional justice. So restorative justice, in the way that I'm using it and the way that you might be hearing it talked about a lot in the public safety dialogues around the country, is more of a Western contemporary movement that you can contrast with the criminal justice system or the traditional criminal legal system in this way. The traditional system generally asks 3 questions: what law was broken or what rule was broken if you take it to the schools, who did it, and what punishment do they deserve? And generally our American criminal legal system does equate punishment with accountability or with justice. In a more restorative approach, you're going to be asking different questions. Still, what went wrong or what rule was broken, what happened, who was impacted, what are their needs, and whose obligation is it to meet those needs? So it's a more holistic approach that, again, when contrasted with the criminal justice system, includes the community as an impacted party, and of course includes the victim or the direct impacted party from a crime. Whereas the traditional system, it's generally the state versus the defendant, or state versus John Doe, in that the victim is taken entirely out of it. So their wants and needs are not necessarily considered at all. Whereas restorative justice definitely looks at the impact of crime and who is impacted at a larger sense. So you have a direct victim, and then you have the community as well represented. So our programs range, like I said, from the proactive side, which is mostly in the schools. As you might know, the Burlington School District is really embracing restorative practices and taking it on at a district level. So one of our staff members is embedded in the 2 middle schools, Hunt and Edmonds, in using restorative practices, both to build community, but also to repair harm. And then most of our programs are in a reactive level after a crime or conflict occurs or after harm occurs. And those also come at various stages of the criminal legal system, from the earliest stage, which would be pre-charge, before it gets to the state's attorney's office, direct from Burlington Police Department or UVM Police, they can refer directly to us, or post-charge but pre-arraignment, and that's where most of our court diversion programs fall, or post-charge, post-arraignment, and we can get referrals from probation and parole through a judge court order. So again, it's not necessary, restorative justice doesn't necessarily come as an either or with the traditional criminal legal system. It can, in some cases, be a complement too. And one of the misnomers, I think, about restorative justice is that it's light on crime, or it's a slap on the wrist, and that it's light on accountability. And if you equate accountability with punishment, then that truly may be a conclusion you reach. But if you're looking for somebody to answer to what they did, to maybe face directly, sometimes literally in the same room, to the person that they harmed or persons, and maybe have to seek to repair and take on the reparations for what the harm was, then you might think that restorative justice is pretty high on accountability. And the current state's attorney, Sarah George, actually challenges people who might have that perspective that it's light on crime to go sit into an average arraignment and an average, or even a trial, and look at what is asked of the responsible party, which is often sometimes nothing. A lawyer can speak through, for them directly. They may never have to talk about what they did. If they have means, then paying a fine might be a punishment that really doesn't hurt that much. And sometimes, as we know, incarceration also has a heavy toll on the community, and as well as the responsible party and those around them, and doesn't necessarily take in the impacted party or the victim's needs. So compare that arraignment or trial to a restorative justice process, and then see what you think about accountability. Another misnomer too is that it might be best for low-level crimes or misdemeanors only, but actually in places where that uses restorative practice as one of its defaults, in like New Zealand, or in many even nonprofits in California and New York, there's examples where restorative justice is used for the highest level of crime, the most violent of crimes. And that's where it's often seen as being most useful, because it comes into play really when victims are heavily impacted and need a voice and need answers to their questions. And so I would just counter another, if anybody has the misperception that it's only best for, quote, low-level crimes, to maybe challenge that thinking. And I'm happy to provide resources about examples of the way it's done in other states or other countries as well. So we provide, I was talking about the various stages of the criminal legal system, and last mentioned post-charge and post-arraignment. And then I would say, finally, we also do reentry work in terms of after somebody is incarcerated, after they've served their sentence and they're coming back into the community, especially for folks who are deemed high risk or high need by the Department of Corrections. We have a program called Circles of Support and Accountability. And that's often used for people who have committed sex offenses or other crimes where they are perceived as high risk, perhaps for recidivism, not necessarily of that same crime, but because of the various kind of conditions put on them in terms of the parole that in their furlough status, the rest of the remainder of their sentence that they might be serving in the community, and the various restrictions that they have on where they can go, where they can live, where they can work. They might be at risk of recidivating in some way. So that program, COSA, is made to help them, they've already served their punishment. So it's not about accountability for their crime, because that's already been answered to by society's, in the terms of them serving an incarcerative sentence, but it's about accountability and support as they rebuild their lives. So there's that continuum. And I also am happy to answer questions, but I did want to just mention our website, which gives quite a bit of information about 10 programs that we offer. And that's at www.burlingtoncjc.org. Thank you.
That was a lot of information. Thank you. Well, we're ending a little early, so we can just jump right into question and answer period. So we've got a generous amount of time for that. So I would really encourage folks, if you have a question for any of the panelists, this is the time. And we've heard a lot of information. So feel free to please, just a reminder to share the street or the neighborhood that you're from when you're asking your question. And if your question's for a specific person, maybe just direct it to them so that they know to respond.
I'm Anthony Stamper, Ward 4. I've got a question. Live in North Shore. Question involves the police. There was a Occupy Battery Park that happened last summer, I think, a year ago, that lasted for a few months. There were nearly daily protests in Burlington. A lot of the protests occurred also at the mayor's house and city council person's house. So my general question is, there's pretty massive protesting in 2020. Where are we with respect to what the protesters were asking for? If the protesters were here today, do you think they'd be happy with the way things have turned out in the past year?
Well, I don't want to speak for the chief or anybody way higher than me, but I think that the police department under the leadership of Chief Murad has made some strides, and like Shireen had said, working with the police commission to incorporate some of those 151 recommendations in the CNA report. I think the big thing that we were waiting on was that report, so that we could find out what the professional group thought that we do actually need to change. So getting that report a couple months ago was really helpful, and I think that we're in a good spot right now, at least for as a patrol supervisor, working with the CSLs and the CSOs to sort of take some of that burden away from police officers, especially since we're down quite a few officers since last year. Having that help where those priority 3 calls can get taken care of, and my officers can go to the burglaries and the assaults and domestics and stuff, things that really require robust police response. So I think we're doing well.
That's a good response. Thank you.
You're not muted. Okay.
And I'm just going to jump in really quickly to say, if anybody wants to speak at the Miller Center, Jeff is there. And so Jeff, just let us know if anybody has indicated that they'd like to ask a question. And also, if we start getting a lot of questions, please use the raise hand feature. And I have a pen and I'll just try and be aware. And I saw Mark, you had your hand up as well. So I was going to call on you, but is there anyone else that wanted to respond to the question that was just asked other than Sergeant Ross?
I mean, I'd be happy to offer my perspective. So just so I clarify your question, it was how do we think the protesters would feel about where we are right now?
Yeah, you basically captured it. Yes.
Okay. I would say that if the intention was for there to be less police officers, then yes, that was part of, which is my interpretation, was part of the mission, was there for there to be less officers as a whole. Unfortunately, there's been a little bit because of how many officers we've lost over time, there's a gap between the positions like the ones I supervise and the CSOs, and those being able to grow fast enough to actually fill kind of the backfill at times. So I think from a different perspective, and I think Sergeant Ross's was great because it was positive, because that is part of it. There's always that other half. And everything, I would agree with every bit of everything that he said was true. But I think that the other side of it was that part of what I think they wanted was for there to be less police officers. And that too is a fact currently.
Thank you again.
If I may, this is John Murad, and I wasn't on schedule to speak, and I missed the presentation that was offered by
Chief, your volume's a little low.
Sorry, is that any better? No.
No.
No, I'm sorry. It's I'm not muted, so I'm not certain what the volume is.
Well, we'll just I would just say then project as loudly as possible because it's very faint on our end.
I thought I was speaking up. I'm sorry about that. So I wasn't here for Sergeant Ross and Lacey's piece. I was actually at a virtual concert for my son, who's at Hunt Middle School, and Hunt Middle School had their big virtual concert tonight, which was wonderful. So I got to see him in chorus, and also he's in the band. But I will say I heard the question, and with regard to the question, I think there's one piece that is there's an old joke about a waiter and a table of activists, and the waiter says, "Is anything all right?" And I think there's a certain amount of sometimes we know that we always want to keep striving for what is best, and what is best is sometimes more improvement and more. And so would there be satisfaction on the part of the folks who were in the encampment last summer? I don't think so. I think that by nature, there's a desire to keep moving for more and to keep seeking more improvement. And I think that's a good thing. It's certainly something that we share as an ethos at the police department. We want to keep getting better. I think one of the things that we've learned over the past almost 2 years now, more than 2 years, is that we have a department that is willing to embrace change and make those changes. The fact is that when the first pieces of that movement, and they weren't the encampment followed the movement that happened with the racial justice resolution in June of 2020. And the encampment happened for 1 month in the very end of August and most of September of 2020. So those demands were somewhat separate from the demands that were created in the racial justice resolution. We embraced those demands and actually took the only steps to start developing responses to those demands. As we lost officers owing to attrition, and officers left the police department because of a combination of sense that they were not supported, a sense that they didn't want to continue to work for a community that they'd long worked for under the current pressures that really were felt acutely in Burlington, but were felt everywhere as well across the country. As we lost those officers, we endeavored to bring aboard these new positions and create them. Those new positions to increase the number of community service officers, CSOs, unsworn, unarmed officers who can respond to quality of life complaints. Increasing those numbers was my plan for the creation of a public safety continuity plan. Creating the community support liaisons, the positions that exist under Lacey. Also, my plan, after a long-stated, repeated refrain of me desiring, frankly, to clone Lacey. I think Lacey's an incredible employee for the city, and I wanted more of Lacey and what she could do. And so we brought forward the idea of the CSL position, mental health, houselessness, substance use disorder. We brought forward the idea of increasing the number of CSOs, low-level priority 3 calls for service, quality of life calls for service. And we said as a department, we want these positions, we want authorization to hire on these positions because we don't have enough police officers to do the tasks that our neighbors expect of us, tasks that our neighbors have grown to expect over the past 2 decades of incredibly good community policing. And so as the number of officers fell and our ability to meet those expectations also fell, we came up with the idea of doing this. And so the notion of embracing perpetual change, of wanting perpetual change and perpetual improvement is not alien to the Burlington Police Department. I think in that respect, I think that we have done a lot since last summer. We created the single most progressive use of force policy in the state, such a good policy that the state adopted it in October as a statewide use of force. There's only one use of force policy now for the entire state of Vermont. It was adopted on October 1st of 2021, and it substantially cribbed from and cut and pasted our policy, which we released in June of 2020 in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. And so I think that there are a lot of things that the department has done quite well in that time period. We've enhanced the transparency with which we deal with our partners on the Independent Police Commission. We make every single use of force that we do public. Every single use of force that the Burlington Police Department has undertaken in 2021 has been made public and it's available online. I present routine, just last night, a very long and fulsome report to the Police Commission. Those reports are online. You can see our data. You can see where our staffing is. You can see what our numbers are for certain categories of crime or of police incident. And those kinds of things are things that we've done before, but we have accelerated and learned to do differently because of the pressures that came from the incredibly horrible events in Minneapolis in 2020 and subsequent events here in Burlington. So I do think that we're actually moving forward and embracing these kinds of changes and seeking to continue to improve. And I don't mean to be shouting, but I don't know how much you can hear or not.
No, it's very faint, so I'm glad you were shouting. Thank you. And I don't see any more hands up, but if folks are feeling that Acting Chief Murad shared a lot of information there, and if folks have other questions for other panelists, please do not hesitate. This is the time to have the conversation. And I also have a question or two, so I'm happy to offer a question as well. So maybe it'll get people going, but this one's mostly directed towards Rachel and the Community Justice Center. One of the things that we're seeing a lot in our community forums, in our Facebook group, on our front porch forums is, and I'm sure people are seeing it around our entire city, is just the uptick in theft. So that's bicycle theft, that is package theft, and also kind of going through cars at night, whether that's a break-in or just forgetting to lock the car. We've just seen a lot of that, or at least I have. And so I guess my question is, what resources, and forgive me if I missed you during your presentation talking about it, could you walk us through a little bit of what might be available to someone whose child's bike was just stolen and maybe can't afford to replace it, or had some valuables stolen, or just simply have been impacted by the theft that they were unfortunately victim of?
Thank you so much for that question, actually, because I was very remiss in not mentioning one of our key programs that would respond to exactly what you described. And that's called Parallel Justice for Victims of Crime. And Lacey actually had mentioned that one of their CSLs who had been in this program previously. So that's a program that we've had in existence since 2006. It's actually co-located. We have one staff member at the Burlington Police Department who shares that database and is able to respond to each week when they have the incidents, the data from the incidents that do involve a victim. They're able to proactively reach out, but we also can respond, obviously, if maybe somebody just decides to post on Front Porch Forum and never reports to the police. We also have a staff member based at the CJC. So whether somebody decides to report or not, or whether the offender or the responsible party is caught or not, this program is available to any victim of crime in Burlington since 2006, actually. So even if it's years later, if the crime happened since 2006, we can help. And that's offers a variety of services, including sometimes just emotional support if that person wants to just talk it out and let their kind of story be heard. It's information and referral to other resources that they might be looking for. And there is a victims fund that can help with certain kinds of compensation, or if the main goal is to help restore the person's sense of safety. So maybe we're replacing a lock, but we also might help the person get security cameras or something that might help them feel a little bit more secure in their home. We also try and coordinate with other victim services. Chittenden County is blessed in having quite a few different agencies as well as just positions that are victim service related. And so if we can help, we try and coordinate with other victim service providers, especially if the person is deciding to, like, for whatever reason, has decided to prosecute and that is going to court or somehow through the criminal legal system. There more resources might be available to that victim and we can help them navigate through that. So thank you. And I know Councillor Barlow had his hand up, so I just wanted to say that we see you.
Thanks. Can I go now? Thank you for that.
Oh yeah, thank you. I can't see everybody's screens. There's so many folks. So thanks for helping with that, Rachel.
My question was, I guess, to Vinny and Lacey. I'm curious about what their views are on the obstacles to hiring additional CSOs and CSLs. I'm really eager to get us more fully staffed, and I'm wondering if those obstacles might be training, finding candidates, or something else.
Well, I'll say on the CSL side, we actually were relatively lucky in terms of, like, there seemed to be a desire for the position or for the job. So I think that, more of us, I think there's space would be an issue. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I don't know. I think that honestly, on the CSL side, we seem to be pretty stable in terms of like, we got up and running pretty quickly. And so funding would always be the reason why there wouldn't be necessarily be more of us, maybe as quickly as there could be money.
I think on the CSO side, we were able to hire the first two pretty quickly because they were in the pipeline just before we got the authorization to hire everybody. I would have to check with recruiting on how it's going now. I know they mentioned, I was talking to our recruiter the other day, that at least one was going through the hiring process right now. So I know everybody's sort of struggling to find work or find help right now. And this might be just one of those positions that falls into that category, unless the chief has anything else to offer.
We were, the city council, and you know this, counselor, allotted us 3 spots for CSLs. We have filled all 3 of those. And you allotted us a total of 10 spots in addition to the 2 we already had for CSOs. We've only filled 2 of those so far. We have an additional 3 that are currently in some form of process right now that are farther along than merely just an application. And so I'm hopeful to be able to get those in. One sort of challenge we have is trying to bring a number aboard so that we achieve an economy of scale in training them, rather than just bringing on 1 here and 1 there. We try to bring them in a group, but then we also don't want to risk losing candidates when we say we can't bring you in for another week or 2. Are you willing to wait? Or even a month or 2, are you willing to wait? So we have to kind of balance that out. We are eager to find new CSO candidates. And so anyone who's on this call who has friends or knows of people who are interested in this position, we would embrace getting new candidates, especially candidates who come from demographics that we want. We want diversity in these ranks. We want to bring in new ways of thought, new kinds of people, different kinds of background. And we're really looking for that. And we're looking for police officers again as well, because the city council was basically sort of reevaluated after the CNA report, the decision to go down to 74 from 105. And now our authorized head count amounts to 87. So we're well below that. We're currently at 69. We are continuing to lose officers. I will lose at least 8 by next summer, and hopefully bring aboard 2 or 3 in that time period, but that's still a net loss. If you have individuals who want to be police officers and who you think would be good candidates, we are always looking for those. And we have a very generous package right now. Again, thanks to the city council, we have a total of $15,000 in hiring incentives for new police officers. We offer $63,300 as a first-year salary, and it's an $82,000 top pay currently. So it's an attractive position. The CSOs make a little bit less than that, but they're attractive positions too. And we are really seeking good candidates. So if you have them, send them our way, please.
Thanks so much. And then I do see a hand with Paul Bushner. So I'll just go to you, Paul. You're free to unmute.
So I'm Paul Bushner, live in Ward 4 on Curtis Ave. And so I had one resource to share of a friend that has recently started a nonprofit called Step Out. It's aiming to help incarcerated women by providing them with life skills through entrepreneurial training and resources. Her name is Cheryl Deersch. She's currently a Ward 4 resident. She's got a deposit on a house in Ward 7, so she's sticking around. And so the webpage is stepoutvt.org. So for the restorative justice folks, and if you're, I know she's actively trying to fundraise to keep things growing and keep it afloat. So if anyone has any year-end contributions they'd be interested in making, get in touch with Cheryl, check out her webpage. And then I just had a couple of comments. As a business owner on Church Street, the lack of police presence this year has done an amazing job of training various individuals as to just how much crap they can get away with. So it's going to take quite some time to undo the lessons that have been learned as a result of not having any restraint out there. everything from aggressive panhandling and catcalling and accosting people downtown, making them feel very uncomfortable, public urination and defecation, open containers, dogs that are off leash and not under the control of their owners. There have been just all kinds of situations down there that have been very, very distressing. And so I just want to put in a plug for the need to have at least CSO level supervision. I think it was mentioned about street entertainers. There's been a young man out there that was playing a drum kit, and it's so loud that I've been having to shout to be heard by my customers. And he was trying to play his drums while some people were caroling downtown and making it very difficult for everybody to hear the songs that were being beautifully sung. So there's just a general need for some more presence downtown, whether it's sworn officers or CSOs. And then I did have one question about CSOs relative to the traffic situation and sort of unrestrained operation of motor vehicles outside of norms on particularly North Ave. If it's possible that the CSOs could be employed in non-criminal traffic enforcement.
Unfortunately, due to the nature of traffic stops and some of the dangers that are inherent in that sort of situation, there isn't a plan right now, as far as I know, to have CSOs do any sort of traffic enforcement other than being on scene for directing traffic and that sort of thing. Just because of the training that they go through, it wouldn't be safe for them to do that sort of thing, unfortunately.
And let me interject just one other hot spot that's there. By the Flynn School, when school is in session in particular, there's a lot of speeding. I mean, it's a wide open stretch of road. And I don't know if it would be possible to get some of the flashing speed signs and some of the, like the radar sign that shows people. So I think some people just don't realize they're in a school zone, but they're picking up a head of steam coming down the avenue. And, it's routinely, I see people going 45, 50, even 60 miles an hour on that stretch of road, which should never happen at any time of the day, but it's particularly egregious when school's in session.
Paul, I've asked for those radar signs on North Avenue Extension multiple times from DPW. I don't know if it's something that VPD can also help with. I know so far there has none been placed there, but I would like to see that as well.
I will just mention that my wife's a transportation planner for DPW, so I can put a bug in her ear as well.
Martine, I saw your hand up. If you'd like to ask your question. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Evan. It's a comment and a question. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, okay, great. Since we're talking about numbers of police officers, I did want to remind folks that our Superintendent Flanagan, earlier this year, put together a safety task force in the district that was, bipartisan. It was a diverse group of people. Students were involved. It was a thorough process. We ended up with a great report on school safety. And it was decided that we were going to have a school resource officer in the district. And I believe, and I would appreciate it if Lacey, Vinny, or Chief Murad could corroborate this, but I think at this time we don't have an SRO because of the low numbers. And I just wanted to make folks aware of that.
That's correct. We don't. Closing the door. We don't currently have an SRO. We have an officer who is assigned as a youth officer. She was one of our two SROs, but she works on issues that are primarily youth related, but she is also a patrol officer, and she picks up regular calls for service on patrol. Part of the rationale for not having an SRO is our low staffing. The other part was that I was not prepared to assign an officer as directed by that task force report. That task force report wanted that officer to be based only at 1 North Avenue, to come to work only when invited, to wear a different kind of uniform and therefore not be available for other kinds of calls for service. And based on both where we were with regard to staffing and with regard to what the officers' preferences were, that wasn't something that we were prepared to be able to meet. And so it's mostly, however, an issue of the fact that when we have 30 officers, we actually only have 29. We have 29 officers available for patrol. And that's for all shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 29 officers spread across the whole city. And we run into these very, very complicated and difficult decisions. If I am going to put officers on Church Street to address the kind of behavior that you are talking about, that we know, my wife was in that caroling group. She's a member of Lyric Theater. She was singing in that caroling group when that man was drumming. If I'm going to put officers on Church Street, I cannot have officers in a area watching traffic near the schools. And if I put resources in downtown, I am robbing the areas to the north and south and the hill section. If I put officers in those sections, I am robbing the area of a certain amount of necessary presence. There is no way around these kinds of decisions. It's one or the other. As we bring aboard more CSOs, I'm hopeful that we'll change that. It was a CSO that actually went and interrupted the drummer this past Sunday when the caroling was happening. CSO came and found him. We issued new instructions to officers about interrupting people who are busking without a license from the marketplace. And so we're hopeful to be able to address that. We have dedicated more officers to Church Street. We've had more presence there over the past couple months. We've instituted an overtime post that is working there, but overtime also is not sustainable. Officers are starting to get burned out. There's only so many hours that they can work in a given day. These are all very difficult decisions, and the SRO one was clearly a difficult decision. We've maintained, however, very close relationships with the schools over issues that happen in the schools, but not having an officer in those schools on a day-to-day basis, forming relationships on a day-to-day basis, being aware of situations that are evolving on a day-to-day basis is a loss. It's a loss for all of us.
Thanks so much for that answer. Martine, did you get most of that?
Yes, I did. And I
Okay.
appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Awesome. I also have a question that I thought I would ask since, but there's still time. We've still got up to 7 more minutes with our presenters. Thank you so much for staying on so late into the evening. So some of the presenters that we invited tonight, we invited you because you're kind of, you're trying something new. There's new innovative programs. We're trying to hire new positions, for everything from park rangers to the positions at BPD. And so one of the conversations that I guess I see come up as well in our community is, around people who feel conflicted about calling police. They can feel conflicted for a variety of reasons. It could be anything from, well, I know they don't have enough officers, because that's been the ongoing conversation, to other personal viewpoints. And so I guess, what would you say to folks who kind of feel conflicted about calling police to respond to some of the low risk issues? So for example, we see folks, all these things already got listed, actually, all the activities in the parks, right? Like the fires, camping in the parks, other types of behavior, party, loud, fireworks is another big one that just seems to come up over and over and over, especially in summer. So what would you say to those folks who are averse to calling police, but still want to have some sort of resolution to the problem that they're being impacted by? And also, what options are available to people after 4:30?
So,
and anyone can answer that. That's not just directed to BPD.
And unless the chief wants to go ahead, as a patrol supervisor for the evening shift, I work 4 p.m. till 2 a.m. And when I first started here 6.5 years ago on that shift, On a double Friday, we would have in excess of 12 to 15 officers. We could have officers being proactive. We could have officers walking Church Street, doing foot patrols in Oak Ledge or Letty Park, and see those low level incidents happening and address them without getting a call. Now we're really only going to find out about them if we get a call. So for those quality of life things, if people want to get them addressed, and it may not be that night, it may not be for a couple of hours, depending on what's going on. But when we have the staffing and it's available, I will send an officer or a CSO when they're on. They're working until 2 a.m. They've gone to a number of noise complaints already, issued tickets, issued warnings. So we're really only going to find out about those things if people call. So if they want them addressed, it's best to give us a call. And the dispatchers know I'm also a dispatcher, and dispatchers are trained on how to sort of prioritize those calls. And if it's right on the edge, they'll call a supervisor and we'll make that determination. So it might not be as quickly as people would want, but once we have the staff available, unless it's after 2:45 in the morning, 3 in the morning, when we only have 2 cops, it will eventually get addressed.
And I'm just going to put in a plug that urges people to report, because even if we can't respond in the moment, for the time being, dispatch is the only intake of data that our city has. We don't have a 311 system. It might be a good idea to develop them, but for the time being, dispatch is the system that measures what's happening in the city. And even as we build other resources, whether they're CSOs or CSLs in the BPD, whether there are other things that the city has, code enforcement, for example, we do have See-Click Fix. That is something that can address certain kinds of conditions. But other conditions, we only know about them if they're reported. And we only know if there's been a critical number of them in order to create a pattern and therefore necessitate a different kind of effort to address if we have reports on all of them. And by the time, and so even if people don't think there's going to be a response, or even if people say, oh, I don't want to bother the police, I urge them to report. With regard to people who don't want to call the police because they have concerns about police response, that is a different issue. But even there, I urge people to report, because without the data, we can't know our numbers. And by that, I mean the numbers of what our city experiences on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. Will there be, if our Parks and Recs, if Cindy or Aaron are on, will there be a way for people to reach out directly to Parks and Rec after hours? For folks who are perhaps, I hear Chief Murad, your concern, and it's valid. I also just want to leave space for the reality that some folks are just not going to call the police and would rather ignore the problem, or attempt to deal with it on their own, or complain about it on Facebook for the next however many days. But would there be an after hours line or any way for people in the community to reach out to the rangers once they're hired, to say, hey, I saw this act, right? To do that sort of, instead of sending everything through BPD and dispatch, would there be a way to say there's somebody blowing off fireworks at North Beach, can you deal with it? And then Matt, I see your hand up, so we'll go to you right after. Thanks.
I can just jump in on that. Yeah, so right now we're setting up the new Urban Ranger office, which will be located at Letty Arena. So it's here in the new North End, and we expect to have not only a phone line to the Ranger office, but once we get employees, so we're still a little bit premature in that sense, but we're going to be broadcasting out what their hours are going to be, so that folks here know that when they can contact them, and or leaving a message with them, and we can follow up. But I'm also going to echo what BPD says. Like, if it's safety or harm, like please call the police. A ranger will not be equipped for that. But if it's off leash dogs and fireworks or fires, we're going to be working with BPD to help relieve some of those fires on the beaches. So that's something that we can take care of. And so that we look to be out there. Also kind of what I had heard previously, we hope to get to it before there's a complaint, but we know that we can't be everywhere at the same time. So we do want our community to help us identify the areas that are causing, harm to quality of life. Thank you.
Thanks. I think, just from being a New North End resident, that we have all the beaches, all the parks. We have a lot of the benefits of that. And it has its issues as well. And so thanks so much. I just think it'll be important for people to know how to contact those rangers once they're hired, as you pointed out, and that they can contact them in the evening without necessarily having to send that through dispatch. I realize we're at 8:20, but Matt Hurlbert has been very patiently waiting. And Rachel, you raised your hand, possibly wanting to just add to that. So if we could just do that and then move into community conversation and let our guests take off. We're so grateful for their time.
I really would love to make a comment and a question too.
Oh,
please.
sure. I apologize, Ali. I did not see you're there.
I'll just acknowledge that actually we're down to one, so I'll be quick. Not so much a question, more just a statement. And it was initially for Chief Murad and Vinny, and now I'm sort of realizing it's to everybody on the call. It's been a really rough 12 to 18 months, both nationally for police and locally for police. I've heard and seen, morale issues and just lots of bad things. But what I'm seeing and really hearing on this call is a lot of different departments that may not have even existed working together in the past, really reaching out and working together. The police is a big business in Burlington. I see it as a large operating business, and businesses go through ebbs and tides, good times, bad times. And, these are those lean times, but I see a lot of growth and development and new ideas and effort. So I just want to thank BPD for keeping your heads up and for everyone that's kind of worked together. There's a lot still to do. I know this isn't going to be done with the change of the new year, but keep it up and keep in touch with what the community can do to help support.
Rachel, if you just wanted to add your quick comment, and I want to make sure that Councillor Dieng has an opportunity to speak while our presenters are here, and then we'll move to community conversation where he can continue to speak as well.
Yes, thank you. I'll try and be brief. I did just want to speak to your question about if somebody does feel nervous for whatever reason about calling the police or has concerns. I don't want to actually replace anything that was said already, because many of those examples were speaking maybe to imminent threats or perceived danger right in the moment. But I do want to just encourage people to, I know I've had to kind of retrain myself about certain issues or certain kinds of crimes, such as domestic violence, where many survivors have, only 10 to 12% of Vermont survivors use the criminal legal system for those particular crimes. And many of those feel like the criminal legal system was not the right method and are looking for other alternatives. We do have a lot of service anti-violence organizations in the community, and also transformative justice groups that are looking for community-based solutions to crime and conflict. And so I don't think there's any kind of quick answer I can give about like who you should call, but I do feel like there are a lot of resources, especially in Chittenden County, when maybe imminent harm. Again, DV is a very complicated case or complicated crime that is a whole spectrum of different kinds of crime within that one name. So I don't want to simplify that issue and say that it's not representing imminent threat or harm. And sometimes the police is exactly who the call should be to. And I know that's also a complicated decision on the part of survivors. But I do just want to encourage people, and feel free to reach out to us. We have a number of different resources about some community-based organizations that could be a good call in terms of mental health issues or other kinds of issues that are presenting a threat or are kind of representing conflict that you feel like deserves some accountability or some redress, but that maybe the criminal legal system is not going to be the best solution for all involved in terms of getting the outcome that you're looking for.
Thank you so much for that. And Ali, did you want to share before we transitioned? I wanted to see
It
you
will
there.
be very quick. And I think first, thank you, Anthony Stemper, for your question. It was just a great, wonderful question. And Murad, I could not hear you very well. Sorry. But when we talk about safety, I think it is about time for the new North End to revisit a comprehensive plan about reinvigorating North Avenue to ensure safety. Because it seems that there are just bits and pieces here and there. And I think it is about time that we come together and just make sure that North Avenue had the attention it deserves, right? And I think three, Mr. Mira, I know we talked about this at least today, but I wanted to understand your limitation about one person who is targeting the LGBTQ community with stickers that he's placing specifically in the New North End. What are those limitations? And what can we do as a community to protect every single one of us to be safe? Thank you.
So I'll try to answer that, and I'm very sorry that you can't hear me. It is probably time for me to get a new MacBook Air, and I just guess this one is not working. And I feel like I'm shouting. I am in my house. My kids and my wife must wonder what the heck I'm doing. I'm definitely shouting. If it appears to some of you that I'm shouting, I'm really sorry. If it appears to others of you, like you, counselor, that you can't hear me, I'm sorry for that too. All right, we did discuss that. I told you I was going to get you some information. I didn't send that to you yet, but I will before I go to bed tonight. Why are we limited in that? We are limited in taking action against something that's not a crime. So putting stickers up on property is not technically a crime. It could be maybe considered a low-level kind of vandalism. If removing it is going to damage the item that it is placed on, that may be considered vandalism. But absent that, it's certainly not a level of crime that our current state's attorney is going to prosecute. And it's not even something necessarily that we would really be able to refer to alternative justice, absent there being something for us to do. And absent a crime, I can't take into account the fact that it may or may not be directed at a person belonging to a certain class, which is what is required for it to be given a hate crime enhancement. To be a hate crime, there has to be a crime underneath. And so while those stickers are troubling, and I have seen pictures of them online, I don't currently have proof of who is doing them, although I have a number of community allegations. I don't currently have a complainant who says my property has been damaged to the level of meeting the criminal threshold for vandalism, and therefore I can't take any action on those things. As I told you, counselor, I debated investigating and going to the individual who is alleged to have done these things. I wasn't quite certain that that was the police prerogative, to go knock on people who are not shown to have done something and say, hey, we're watching you for this thing. It is a component of a very innovative way of directing police resources towards violent actors. It's a component of a program called Ceasefire for people who are committing gun crime and shootings, where you actually go to individuals known to be associated with those acts and say, we're watching you, we're going to hammer you if you continue to do this, but we are going to offer you other things if you don't. We're going to offer you jobs and work plans, etc., school. That's great for violence. And I think that the threshold for what police can and can't do rises when there is violence in play. That's not what we have here. And so I'm trying to determine what I have with regard to crime. The ones that were reported to us via the internet, and also some crime reports are several months old at this point. I wasn't aware that it was something that was happening again. You mentioned to me that you had somebody who may or may not be able to demonstrate more substantially who's actually doing it. That might change the equation, but ultimately the equation is still going to be dictated by whether or not there's a crime. And there has to be some kind of damage in order to be a crime.
Thank you all so much. I don't want to cut into our community conversation any further. And I also want all of you to be able to head back to your lives outside of work. So thank you all for joining us. And I really appreciate Ali's question right there. That's helpful clarification. And it's great to know that that conversation is still happening. It hasn't been forgotten. And so if you'll all just thank our presenters if you feel like it. Thanks a lot for joining us. And we don't see this as the end of the conversation either. So I look forward to having future conversations in our community about safety. And you're welcome to stay with us as well. So I want to give you an out.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Cool. So now, without further ado, and Paul, I do see your hand up there, so maybe you can kick it off with Olivia. But I want to introduce Olivia Taylor, who is my neighbor, but she is in Ward 7, and she's a member of the NPA steering committee, and she's graciously offered to kind of co-facilitate this conversation with us. So thanks, Olivia.
Thank you, Evan, and thank you for doing such an incredible job navigating this whole conversation. So my name's Olivia. I'm on Ethan Allen Parkway, and I am the newest member of the NPA steering committee. I and my fellow steering committee members wanted to give a space outside of asking questions to the panelists, but a space for us to have like an empathetic, caring conversation where residents of the New North End can gather in collective conversation. People can share their perspectives, their own personal experiences with public safety. We just really want this to be a polite as possible and not accusatory conversation, one where we can all hear what everyone's experiences have been and really try to make next steps as a community to consider these experiences in the future. Paul, not to call you out, but if you do want to start, you are welcome to.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one point relative to the previous conversation. If the worst problem we have is some road buskers out on Church Street, we're doing pretty well from a public safety perspective. But I did want to make one point about it was interesting that the chief's wife, he had some personal insight into that situation. The CSO showed up. I was there, watched him, spoke with this individual. The young man packed up his drum kit and was back 5 minutes later. And so the salient point that I wanted to make there is that without a consistent presence, it's one thing, you can fight a fire, but if you don't put it all the way out and the embers are still there, then the fire comes back. So it's one thing to just knock it down. It's another thing to put it out. And the only way, I think, for Church Street in particular to be perceived by the public, because I get a lot of feedback on that, as a safe place, is to have a consistent presence. So you can't do it hit and miss. And, you know, I've been out there since 2003 with my business. So I've seen quite a few different things and a lot of antisocial behaviors. And it really does take a consistent law enforcement presence in order for those things to even have some modicum of control. So just wanted to make that observation about the sort of law enforcement presence on the marketplace in particular.
Thank you, Paul. I wonder, because I do want to shift the conversation to public safety experiences in the New North End, if you have any experiences in our neighborhood that you would like to share, or anything along those lines.
You know, I think I brought up about unsafe driving, particularly on North Avenue. And there was a post of a woman that had posted on Front Porch Forum about someone that almost hit her and what a harrowing experience that was for her. And it was 9:30 or 10 in the morning. She was coming from Hannaford's, trying to make a left-hand turn onto Sanford, and somebody passed her on the left. If she hadn't seen them, she could have gotten T-boned on her driver's door by that car. So people are doing pretty crazy things out there. And when they know that there's no traffic enforcement, again, it's a matter of the consistency of a presence. If it isn't there, then people that want to engage in that kind of behavior feel much more emboldened to do it, I think.
Thank you, Paul. I want to open it up to anyone else who wants to share any experience or perspective around public safety in our neighborhood. And really anything you want to share is open.
I'm just going to help you, Olivia, because some folks are raising hands. So I saw Annie Lawson.
Oh, I can't see any hand raising.
That's okay. She was in the attendee section and then it bumped over. Annie, did you have a question or something you wanted to share?
Yeah, and I think you were asking for intros kind of as we go, and I'm arriving late because I was working late and have a toddler, but I live in Ward 4 and I appreciate the chance to have this conversation. My thoughts about public safety in the New North End are that, could you not do that, please? Thanks. Because my thoughts are that public safety has to extend to all community members, regardless of their role in the community. And so for me, one piece that is still missing from our community is a greater sense of accountability for the police who are charged with keeping all community members safe. Working in Burlington makes somebody a community member, whether they live here or not. And I think that there's been an unproductive development of a dichotomy between the idea of accountability and antagonism. And I heard a really nice phrase a few years ago, which was the idea that being against abuse of power by police doesn't make you anti-police any more than being against child abuse by parents doesn't make you anti-parent. And I like that analogy because the two ideas have become so conflated. But we know that there's been studies that show that retired police officers, once they retire, post a lot of white supremacist and anti-racist material on social media. And so that's a national study. And so we have to assume Burlington and Vermont are part of the country. And so those same trends may exist here as well. And so putting in place mechanisms to really just hold police accountable for when they mess up makes everybody safer in the community. It doesn't have to mean that we're out to get police or out to punish them in any way. It just means if we have standards for good job performance in private sectors, why would we not have that same standard in a role that touches so many lives and so many members of the community and at its root is a core part of the community. So as a member of this neighborhood, that's one of the main things I think has been missing from forward momentum toward a safer community. And I would welcome just hearing people's thoughts around that topic or whatever else folks are here to share on. Thanks.
Thank you, Annie. Evan, if you see someone else with a hand raised, for some reason, I'm not able to see it. Okay. Or if anyone wants to just go off mute and speak.
You can jump in.
You are welcome. This is a conversation. We want to make it as natural as possible on Zoom. And I will say, for the amount of Front Porch Forum and Facebook posts I see about public safety, I'm quite surprised by the silence.
I don't mind adding, although I've talked quite a bit because I'm kind of going through the facilitation, but I personally maybe have that struggle of balancing between like, do I call the police or not? I often feel reticent, which is maybe why I asked that question, because I feel like I'm connected to people who also share that reticence of like, is this a situation where I need to call the police? Is someone in, urgent danger, right? And so I'm personally really looking forward to hiring the Ranger program. And if it goes really well, I'd really personally like to see it expanded, because we do have so many beaches and parks. We're so lucky to have miles of beachfront here in the New North End, and so many wonderful park spaces. And I feel safe in most of them, but not all of them, especially at this time of year when it gets dark at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I also just want to see that balance of respecting unhoused people and their need to access public land, and also our responsibility to steward that land appropriately and not allow it to fall into a state of disrepair, disarray. And so I personally struggle with that, being next to a park, being next. I live on, I should have said earlier, I live at Cambrian Rise. And so I'm right next to the newly named, I think it's Keyslick Park, which is actually the Burlington Parks and Rec main offices. And just the amount of activity that happens in the woods after 4:30 and on the weekends that there isn't necessarily an ability to deal with in real time, and blocking off of paths with fallen trees so that people don't use them, so that you can kind of take over that space and that path. And so just trying to find a way to share land, and again, not allow it to end up with large bags of trash and furniture discarded and feces and tent sites that have been partially abandoned, needles. And so I'm speaking only from experience, that's not theoretical. So I guess that comment that Annie just shared, I can empathize with it. And also just, I'm really hoping that the Ranger program goes well and that we get those folks hired and we get some wonderful people into that position and maybe even expand it.
Thank you, Evan. If other people don't.
I'll just add to Evan's comments about camping in the park. It's been, and I'm not speaking as a city councilor now, I'm speaking as a friend of Leddy Park. We've been cleaning Leddy Park for nearly 12 years now, sometimes twice a year. And I can tell you that remediating some of the informal campsites is some of the most intensive work we've had over the years. I mean, our parks, we have clear ordinances about camping in the parks. And it's been even an ongoing effort this summer. And Lacey's done a tremendous job of trying to inform people of the city ordinances around camping in parks. And for the most part, they've moved on or gotten into other housing programs or gotten other services. But it's an ongoing issue, and I agree with Evan. It needs to be sort of dealt with in real time. And I'm hopeful also that the Urban Park Ranger program is going to be a resource to help us manage a lot of the activity that goes on in the park that are essentially quality of life issues. And I would even argue issues around compatibility of use. We have soccer fields at Leddy where there's active drinking going on while there's youth sports programs going on there at the same time. So those are the sorts of things that I think that I'm hoping that the Urban Park Rangers can help us manage better.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm definitely also very excited about the Urban Park Rangers. I think one of my favorite things of the Burlington parks, especially Leddy, is when you go, you see everyone. And I think having some Urban Park Rangers will be a really cool experience, especially if there's someday a new North End one. I would really appreciate that. I think I've definitely been at the park for sunset and walked back from sunset and felt very different than getting there before sunset. I see both Sarah Carpenter and Jeff Clark have their hands raised. Sarah, you can go first.
Thanks. Just to sort of piggyback on one of my roles is on the Human Resources Committee of the city. And this is just more generic, but we are very concerned about the city's ability to recruit staff in general. I mean, and so the loss of officers and at the police force was precipitated by probably morale and a lot of different reasons, but there has been financial capacity to hire people, just like the CSOs. We have the money to do it, and the whole recruitment effort is really problematic. And I'm just saying that because people are so anxious now. I think we're in a good place financially, or not a good place. We have the authorized ability to hire people. We've simply got to find them in this environment, and it's affecting a lot. I mean, we don't know if we're going to have enough people to plow the streets this winter. So it's frustrating, and I guess I'm just sort of tossing that out there, if nothing else. And I personally would appreciate any feedback, you get from people like why won't you apply for a job with the city? Is there something better we can do to entice people to work with us? More flexibility. So any feedback on that would be useful.
Jeff, if you want to go ahead.
Okay, Olivia, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So I'm in the Miller Center. I'm in Ward 4, and I'm on the steering committee as well. And I wanted to push back a little bit on the park rangers, not the idea of them, but the number of 2. The city of Burlington, when you think of the percentage that is parks, it seems like it will be similar to what Paul is describing that goes on Church Street. The city is what percentage park? Is it 67%? I mean, it's a huge number of acres that 2 park rangers will be covering. So I just wanted to bring up that point. The other observation that I had is I think these are all tremendous, excellent answers to where the city wants to be moving toward. I almost see that there's a little bit of overlap in some of them, and who will be the entity that would ever point out that there's an overlap and, say that, restorative justice should be, done with the Community Justice Center and on this topic and, not this person. So I think overlap is not where we are right now because everyone's spread so thin, but if that ever does come into place, who would be the entity that would say that this team has it?
Yeah, I think it's it's a combination when you think about safety of a lot of things that are happening in the city. A lot of new initiatives that are happening in safety in the city. From 100 police cap office to 79, and now we are talking about, the elimination of the SRO program, and the creation of new other initiative, the cahoots model. Like it's so deep and LGBTQ, racism, things that the law, criminal justice reform does not allow to happen. It's so complex, but in Burlington, there are so many great things happening from my perspective, but the data that has been shared here, and I would want to listen to that, read that article, like that study, like where police officers, when they retire, that's when they will start to post about white supremacists, communication online about how the system has been. This is new, and I would want to hear that more. Accountability basically follows us, even when we retire. The individual, the person that live in this city, in this state, should be really safe in so many different ways. And Burlington is doing well. And I like the theme tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to pass it back to Annie. She has her hand raised and is joined by someone I can see.
Hello. Yeah. So actually, I'm Adam. So Ward 7 as well. And yeah, I think just kind of what I've been thinking about, and I missed the front end to kind of hear the presentation on the urban park rangers. So, I guess I'm just speaking from I guess what I think the program may or may not be. So I'm hopeful that can be a service that meets the needs of the folks in our community. And I'm a person who works directly with lots of folks living with substance use disorder, experiencing houselessness and homelessness. And I just think my hope is that this program, they do a nice job of figuring out the right people who can build a relationship and actually find ways to connect. Because I think it's one thing to have a new kind of person in town to provide these supports, and it's another to figure out the right fits for people who have the ability to engage and have these conversations. And I think that's the smallest piece of the biggest challenge that our community is facing, and what our community is facing is a lack of housing, a lack of resources. And I think we can have people patrolling the streets, we can have park rangers in the parks, but if we don't have actual solutions for folks to have an opportunity to have a different option, I don't think it's going to really matter. And that's kind of where I'm at. And I think that my hope is that's how our community starts thinking about these things of solutions that are going to meet the needs of everyone. Because people I sit with have dynamic needs, and that need is being unmet in our parks here in the New North End, and also for all of us who are engaging downtown. I mean, it's something that I think I'm hopeful for, and also just want to note that the systems need to be the ones to be really looked at, in my opinion. And these services that are going to be in the community are going to be great, but if there's not anything for them to connect to, then it's I don't see it as a viable solution.
Thank you.
And the last thing is, I'm 100% cars need to slow down. We've got cars ripping through our streets, and it really is something that I'm really fearful of someone being hurt. It's we're on Stanford, and cars can come down our road at 40 miles per hour. And I know the North Ave, and I think that's just something that's always on my mind is just reckless driving is really something that's that I sit with daily.
Thank you. I appreciate you also bringing that up. I think a lot of people are very concerned with traffic safety in our neighborhood. I think that's something we can definitely all agree on. Sarah, would you like to speak?
Is that me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. I so agree with what Adam says, and I just not to punt this, but so many of these issues we're talking about are really regional and controlled by the state. I mean, tomorrow night we're going to talk about some change in policy from Department of Corrections that's removing a housing support. There's removal of support for the Turning Point Center. The state's in line to get a big opioid settlement nationally, but it goes to the state. It doesn't go to the city, really. And so, we have good legislators, but we really need to make our collective voice known, because Burlington can't solve it. And this is just my sense of frustration. Houseless folks don't remain houseless in some of our neighboring communities because there's no services. They come to our town because we have the services. And I don't have any easy specific answer, but really bringing that collective voice to our state elected officials, or at least our local Burlington ones and our county one. We have a mixed bag of state senators, and they're good, but they need to understand that Burlington ends up with a brunt of a lot of things, and it's not always acknowledged very well.
Thank you, Sarah. Do you have suggestions of who people should reach out to and what they should do?
Well, I think our collective Burlington delegation, we can certainly make those names available. I think they're all going to be running next, whenever in a year. I think just speaking up to people, each of them individually. And, it's interesting. I think sometimes these people aren't as aware of even who they are. We've been very good, and our folks have tended to come to the NPA. I'm not sure that's always the case. We have a delegation of Chittenden County senators, and I think those folks are not as well known to individual residents. So I think you kind of peg them to their expertise, not necessarily, feel as open to call them about general stuff. So I think, I welcome being called, but I think making your concerns known sort of just more broadly. There's no easy answer to it, but I just think letting those folks know as well the frustrations that we have. And maybe it's, having always lived in Burlington, maybe I have a little chip on my shoulder, but a lot of things get left to Burlington because we're the biggest city. And then I think there's the presumption that we've got all the solutions, and we just plain don't.
Thank you. I'll give it to you in a second, Paul. I just wanted to mention something I thought about that I guess is positive, because I did want this to not only be or I wanted to make it a positive conversation. I think our house was one of the many that had a lot of car break-ins in our driveway, and I think that is a really easy thing to kind of blame yourself for, whether you had the car locked or unlocked or whatever. But we actually haven't had any at all since we put a floodlight in. And I think I don't, this maybe is very obvious to a lot of people, but I think we really did not notice how much those little things do in the area. And I just want to pass that along. So if anyone also has any little things that I think are helpful in addressing the bikes or any of the small issues, I think there are things that we all can do like that, because we probably had cars broken into 5 or 6 times, and then since the floodlight, nothing. So sometimes the simplest answer is the right one. And Paul, I'll pass it to you.
First of all, I just wanted to give a big here to what Sarah shared as far as engaging our elected representatives, because Burlington really does end up as the locus for a lot of these social programs. And if you're going to be houseless in Chittenden County, you're going to choose Burlington to do it, because that's where all the services are. We attract teens, spectrum and things that are in distress. Well, where are they going to go if they're from, what services are in the outlying areas? They all gravitate to our community, and we need regional solutions within Chittenden County and outside of Chittenden County. So I think it really is important to let that be heard. Not just, I've had discussions with the mayor about it, that we really can't just be playing whack-a-mole in our own community, but we really do need to try and comprehensively work with the region to try and bring services to people. And so that's I think a big key. And then relative to the park rangers, I really personally would feel that they should be CSOs or a combination of CSO, CSL, and not that are dedicated to the Parks Department, but I don't know that I really approve of it. I mean, it's a great idea. I want, resources for some attention in the parks. But you almost need to put them in our neighborhood on bike patrol, because you've got so much area to cover. You're going to go up into Ethan Allen Park and, through the Arms Woods and out to Rock Point, up and down the bike path and over the new park. You'll pardon me not being able to pronounce it, but over by Cambrian Rise, the wonderful new land that we're getting as a part of that. And then also trails that go down on the other side of the avenue towards Route 127. And so there are a lot of trails. There's a lot of ground to cover. And thankfully, in my case, my wife and I and our friends access those trails a lot. And I haven't really seen a lot of threatening behavior. I've never felt unsafe in any of our parks personally, which isn't to say that there aren't problems or needs there, but I'm very grateful for the fact that we've regularly accessed those natural areas and been able to enjoy them, freely. So.
Thank you, Paul. I'll let Annie go, and then we're going to close out as it's getting very close to the end of our time, but I really appreciate everyone sticking to their not speaking for too long and really letting everyone have a voice. Annie, go ahead.
Thanks. And I really appreciate you letting me circle back around to a question from Councillor Jang. And I think that the nature of this conversation means that sometimes the flow can be a little disjointed. So what I'm saying is referring to a question from some few comments ago. So I mentioned a study that collected data about social media posts by police officers, and Councillor Jang expressed interest in hearing more about that. So I looked it up, and it's been written and rewritten in multiple sources, including BuzzFeed, CBS, and the New York Times. And the one that I'll very briefly quote from is from the New York Times presentation of the information. A study was done in 8 different counties around the country, and they list the cities. There are varying sizes, many larger than Burlington, a few cities smaller than Burlington. And it says that the researchers began with about 14,000 names of officers, and they were able to verify Facebook profiles for about 2,800 current officers, about 700 more in addition to that who had once worked for those departments. And about 1 in 5 of the current officers, including many in supervisory roles, and more than 2 in 5 former officers, used content that was racist, misogynistic, Islamophobic, or otherwise biased, or that undermined the concept of due process. So I quote that to show that there is a problem with abuse of power within police departments, and we're not going to get to a place of increased safety in the city if all residents of the city can't trust that the people in charge of law enforcement are safe people. And that study shows that there's many people involved in police culture who are not, and I think police oversight here in Burlington would go a long way toward building that trust and increasing overall safety.
Thank you. Now, unless anyone else from the NPA steering committee wants to have any closing remarks, I think we are at 9:01 exactly. I really appreciate everyone speaking and sharing their thoughts and perspectives, and for making this a success in a conversation on public safety. Anything from any of my members?
I guess I'll just add that we're going back to the regular schedule, the 4th Wednesday of the month in January. And, if you have agenda items, let us know. And we're looking for steering committee members too.
Yeah, so if you're passionate about all of this, come join us, please.
I promise we have fun together.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful holiday season and Happy New Year.
Thanks, Olivia.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Great job, Evan.
Bye, everyone.
And Olivia.
Thanks for joining.
Good Good night, everybody.
Thanks.
Good night, guys.